very quickly before we start, it's important in a time like this that we note how important and successful Erasmus Plus has been, not only for ColegauCymru or other colleges that are part of our membership, but also for individuals, be they lecturers or learners who've had the opportunity to have a taste of European experiences through the Erasmus Plus scheme. We have received over €7 million in investment for apprenticeships and vocational placements in order to send young people to work placements for 2 to 3 weeks. There is also money that has been set aside for staff, and we will hear more about this during today's session. Projects include well-being projects and sports projects, and there will be a presentation on those projects also during the next hour. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce Sian Holleran, the International Coordinator for ColegauCymru. She is going to speak in English, and she will tell us generally about the Erasmus Plus programme, and will also introduce 2 individuals who have greatly benefited from the scheme. Thank you, Sian. It's a chance for you to speak about the programme and the apprenticeships that are involved. Thank you, Iestyn, and good afternoon to you all.
To be with you today and to talk about ColegauCymru's Erasmus Plus projects and the impact that taking part in them has had on learners, apprentices and staff in the FE sector in Wales. This isn't just talking about a personal impact, but the changes that can also take place in a college, in the workplace, and maybe more widely in the community as a result of taking part in the projects. My main responsibility at ColegauCymru is to apply for Erasmus Plus funding on behalf of all of the FE colleges in Wales. And as Iestyn just alluded to, since 2014, when Erasmus Plus was launched, €7 million of funding has been made available to the colleges in Wales from ColegauCymru's Erasmus Plus consortium projects. The majority of the funding enables vocational learners and apprentices to undertake 2-week work placements in over 15 European countries. The funding also provides overseas CPD opportunities for FE staff and managers. The work placements for vocational learners are appropriate to the subject areas and qualifications that they're studying in Wales. And a network of over 40 EU partners supports us in finding quality work placements that can contribute to the achievement of those qualifications in Wales. These are real learning opportunities for our young people. There's a focus on identifying learning outcomes that can be achieved overseas and recognising those achievements when the learners come back to Wales. But in addition to enhancing the technical skills of participants, we also focus on the development of soft skills or human skills. For many of our learners, this may be their first time to travel abroad. They may not have a passport and they may not have considered travelling to Cardiff for work, let alone thinking about working overseas. So the growth that we see in the confidence, the independence and the resilience of the participants is a key indicator of the impact of these experiences on young learners. And we've got loads of examples of how these experiences can change the lives of young people. One that sticks in my mind is a young childcare learner from ColegauCymru who was selected to go on a work placement in a nursery school in Castelfranco, northern Italy for 2 weeks. She didn't have a passport, had never travelled abroad. And when I met her after the visit to get her feedback on the visit, her words were, "I have different values now and new goals that I want to achieve." And she was then applying for nannying jobs in London and Australia. These experiences definitely raise the aspirations of young people and broaden their horizons. We're going to hear more from Shane and Bryony in a second in how their experiences have impacted on their careers at TATA Steel. ColegauCymru's Erasmus Plus projects also offer CPD opportunities for FE staff. And since 2014, we've undertaken a number of visits to European countries. We tend to identify a Welsh Government priority for the sector and focus on visiting another country where we can learn from the good practice and policy direction in place in that country. Examples of past visits have included exploring the delivery of higher level skills in Denmark, innovation in vet in the Basque Country, and multilingualism in Catalonia. Future funding that we currently have sitting in the bank is to look at the digitalization of vet in Baden-Württemberg in Germany and the professional learning of vocational staff in Ireland, Austria and Norway. All of these projects focus on priorities for the sector, and the aim is to bring learning back to Wales so that we can inform policy and improve provision in Wales. Emil Evans from Cardiff and Vale College will speak in more detail on some of these visits in a short while. But what I hope that we achieve in today's session is to highlight the importance of Erasmus Plus to the FE sector in Wales. Without this funding, learners who would never be able to afford this type of opportunity will be missing out on experiences that will continue to be available to their peers across Europe. It will put them at a disadvantage and limit their exposure to work opportunities overseas and insights into different cultures and languages. ColegauCymru currently has Erasmus Plus funding to use for learner and staff mobilities until 2022. However, what still remains an uncertainty at this late stage in the EU-UK negotiations is whether the UK will be participating in the future Erasmus Plus programme that begins in 2021 and continues until 2027. This is a concern for ColegauCymru, as we feel that not being involved in the Erasmus Plus brand will negatively impact on the network of partners that we have built across Europe over the last 10 years. Obviously, we need to adapt to the changes that have been brought about by COVID-19, and we all need to think of creative ways that we can become more international in our outlook and expand our contact with European and global partners in the future. However, what remains central to our commitment to internationalization of the vocational sector is the principle of Erasmus Plus and the opportunities and benefits that it brings to our young learners and staff. So diolch am wrando, thank you very much for listening. I'm now going to have a conversation with two participants in Erasmus Plus projects, Bryony Morgan and Shane Ash, who work at TATA Steel. And I'm going to pass over initially to Bryony. And could you introduce yourself? Tell us what your role is at TATA Steel and where you went for your Erasmus Plus experience.
Hi everybody, my name is Bryony. As Sean mentioned, I work for TATA Steel. I'm based in the Port site and I work in the technical laboratory department. I work specifically with the raw materials testing, so we test all the raw materials we get from overseas, so everything that goes in the blast furnace, coke oven, sinter plant, all that kind of stuff. I'm the daily technician there, so I'm responsible for the training of the shift teams, managing equipment, ensuring calibrations are up to date on all of our things, and just ensure all our results are accurate and all that kind of stuff. During the Erasmus scheme, we visited our sister plant in Ymyriadau in Holland. There we got to see sort of our similar areas. We got to split off so I could see the specific lab that I work in, contrast, compare, all that kind of stuff. But we also got an overall experience of their entire plant and other labs as well.
Thanks, Bryony. That's really interesting. What about you, Shane? What's your sort of career path at TATA Steel?
Hello all. So my name's Shane. I currently work as landwear service engineer at landwear TATA Steel. Primarily this includes completing small and large projects across site and also offering support across site, whether it be down days, so maintenance and things like that really. Similar to Bryony, I went on the same trip, so we visited the sister company just to get an overview of what they do there, run through the same sort of areas and see what sort of sharing and learning we could pick up and things like that. Yeah, it was great.
Thanks, Shane. And Bryony, is that opportunity to visit your sister plant in Netherlands, would that be open to you if it wasn't through an Erasmus Plus scheme?
No, you do hear of people going, so you know, a lot of management and things like that will tend to visit the sister plant for various reasons. But obviously, we were apprentices at the time, and I can't think of a single apprentice other than through this scheme that had the opportunity to go to and visit that plant.
Okay.
Yeah, I would agree with that.
All right, Shane. So you spent 2 weeks living and working in the Netherlands. What's been the biggest impact on the visit on you personally? And did it change you in any way, or your career aspirations, for example?
I think this the personal experience, like you said, that the main things like opened your eyes to working abroad. I probably would have never thought about that before going on the trip, to be honest with you. Networking, it gave us lots of networking opportunities, both within the company and externally as well. And then also, yeah, the sharing and learning that it offers you, you know, is great. And equally as well for myself, the confidence side of things, going away with a group of people you don't even know to a new country is a big thing for myself. So it helped boost my confidence, and yeah, it was great.
Okay, thanks. Have you got anything to add to that, Bryony, from your own perspective?
Yeah, it's definitely just widened all of the possibilities I think you can achieve, and I think it definitely widens that. Like, you know, as you mentioned, you think, well, you know, I could work in Cardiff, or I could potentially work in London. I think, well, yeah, I could work in Holland or anywhere. You know, it's the skills you have are so adaptable, and it shows you that you can apply them anywhere. And you know, just from a personal perspective, it's made my communication skills so much better, you know, after experiencing barriers such as language and, you know, people who work in a very different way to you, because I think people's mindsets, just from being in a different country, the way they approach things is just so different. And that's bettered my communication skills on how to approach projects, or just asking people to help or have a look at something. And that's really made a massive difference. Not to mention, you know, I've been able to put this work experience, which is invaluable, on my CV. I've been able to speak about it in job interview scenarios and all that kind of stuff, and it's really, really great experience.
Thanks, Bryony. And that leads us on quite nicely, really, to the impact it's maybe had on your department or on TATA Steel itself. You know, obviously you've been off your day job for 2 weeks while you were in the Netherlands. What were you able to bring back to TATA Steel?
Obviously, we had notice before we went out to Holland, so I was able to sort of start planning a project at home in Port Talbot before going out, so I could collect some data and have a look at some equipment, speak to some people and specialists out there that I was able to develop. More for like a database and like a calculation that we were having some trouble with at home, which has now been put in place. But it's not just been that project. I've been able to, you know, short term, there were smaller projects, equipment that we sort of wanted, didn't know whether it would be applicable for us, all that kind of stuff has worked. But longer term as well. So, you know, 2 years down the line, I'm still communicating with people that I met over at Moyden. And also, I think they as a company, they help from me as well, because I would recommend things to them too. So, you know, things I think maybe we are doing better, which wasn't much, to be honest, but the small things that we were doing better, we were able to communicate that. And obviously there's, you know, just economic, but lots of different advantages for the company, then time saving, all that kind of stuff. You know, just 6 months ago, I set up, a group of us set up a database where we share all of our test data, so we can pull that sort of data and check the accuracies of our machine for tolerances and all that stuff, which is super, super helpful with, you know, especially if you've only got one machine. How do you know how accurate it is? And without investing thousands and thousands of pounds into a new one, they've already got one, and we can get that data from there. But that's so much further on than when we visited Holland, just to show that the relationships we've built is solid and they're so helpful for the company going forward.
That's really good to hear, that there are longer term benefits. It's not just the immediate kind of positivity that comes when you come back. And what about you, Shane? Have you managed to implement something different?
Yeah, so similar to Bryony, quite a few things, to be honest, but the main one for me that stands out is I'm currently implementing a drossing manipulator. So just to give you a bit of background, I most primarily work on the galvanizing line, the Zodiac at Lamwern. So I've got a lot of experience around that area. So obviously going out to Ymyriadau, I wanted to visit that area, which we did. And then from that, I was able to talk to the guys there, interact and learn from each other. And one of the bits of equipment that particularly interested me was what we call a drossing manipulator. So on the pot, it's like a zinc bath that the strip passes through to coat the strip steel for the corrosion properties on cars, etc. On that, you get impurities from things like oxidation and the low melting points. So obviously these impurities have got to be removed. Now, certainly since I began and way before this, always been removed via job-specific spoons, which is very labour-intensive. And also you stood next to 500-degree molten metal, so it's very dangerous and also very time-consuming. You could be optimising these people on other processes, for example. So obviously seeing this new machine, if you like, that takes this need for manual labour and putting you right where the danger is away, I got really involved with that and took the ideas back home. I've since been able to do a concept analysis. I put a project proposal and all forward to the engineers and managers here at Lamwern, and I'm now running with that project. That's my sort of thing, and it's a £60,000-70,000 project. So it's gonna make a big difference to us here at Lamwern. Hopefully over the next year or two, we'll recoup that money as well from the utilisation of manning. And it'll overall make it more safe and better. So yeah, we gained a lot from it.
That's great, Shane. Thanks for that. It's really good to see a sort of practical application of what you learned in the Netherlands coming back here to Wales. So obviously we're running out of time a little bit. I'm sure we could all listen to you two for ages, really. But just to finish off, really, Bryony, what other benefits has it brought to you? Do you think? I know you talked a bit earlier when we had a little run through about some of the cultural things you got to do when you're in the Netherlands as well.
Yeah, I think obviously for the last 10 minutes when we've been speaking, we focused a lot on work and what work was like out there and how was work affected and how was your personal work, affected. But it's a lot of the experience was just a fantastic experience, work aside. We were able to, experience the Dutch culture, all the kinds of, their food, how they lived. We did, lots of different trips to the flour making windmill thing, and we went to the beach with a group of apprentices that worked there. So all that kind of stuff was just amazing to be a part of. So work aside, anybody who does have the opportunity to do something like this, I encourage anybody to go for it, because honestly, all of us had such a good time.
Okay, and I think the last word goes to you then, Shane. So what else has it brought to you?
Yeah, so similar to Bryony, I think the personal experience was absolutely superb. I'd recommend it to anyone, and I'll back it, all the way. Support as much as I can as I'm doing today, but also for myself as well. I think being able to put it on like your CV and application. So I recently last year won the Welsh Government Apprentice of the Year. And I think that was directly, to be honest with you, off the back of this. It's given me this new project, which I just spoke to you about, brought me into contact with new people, and just generally, yeah, I think, if it weren't for this experience, I wouldn't be where I am today. So, yeah.
Great, thank you very much. Diolch yn fawr. Thank you both.
Thank you.
Diolch, Sean, Shane, Bryony Harris.
Thank you to Sian and to Shane and Bryony.
Time is really racing ahead, but we do have, looking at my screen, 60 people in this virtual committee room, Minister. I don't think we'd all have fitted into those committee rooms with the warm sandwiches and sort of teas and coffees at the back. So it's a hopefully very good, strong and engaged audience with 2 questions already coming in. So Minister, if I can hand over to you just to respond, obviously, to that presentation. I know you've met Bryony and Shane and other apprentices before, and we've been really grateful for your thoughts and consideration on Erasmus+. I would love to hear a bit more from you now, please.
Well, diolch yn fawr, Iestyn, a prynhawn da I bawb.
Thank you very much, Iestyn, and thank you for the invitation to contribute to this first virtual meeting of the cross-party group, to tell you what I think of Erasmus Plus and how important it is for the future of Wales. It's a very timely meeting because it's happening today on the same day as the meeting of the European Council, and the deadline that the UK government and the European Union have set to try to put into place an agreement on the relationship between the UK and the EU in future. And thank you very much to Bryony and Shane for sharing their experiences of the Erasmus Plus programme. I had the opportunity, I think it was last year, to hear their ideas and a number of other learners as well. And it was clear to me then, and again today, how important and how much of a positive contribution this programme has made to these young people's lives. I'm also aware that it's not only learners who are able to benefit from Erasmus Plus. We've also heard from Sian that it can help to expand the experiences of staff and to teach them about good practice and innovation happening in other places. Being able to hear these stories directly from contributors and participants is very useful to remind us all of the benefits of Erasmus Plus and to remind us that they go way beyond just numbers on a page. This programme offers opportunities that can truly transform the lives of individuals. It goes much further than just the economic element. And that's why myself and my colleagues in Welsh Government have always given our full support to the Erasmus Plus. And following the result of the referendum in 2016, we have continued to declare clearly that Wales should be given the opportunity to take full part in the programme in the future, and that continues to be our viewpoint on the matter. The new Erasmus Plus programme, which offers more support for short mobility schemes, would be particularly beneficial to the further education sector. The new programme will be launched next year and allows third countries to fully participate. So there's no reason why leaving the European Union should mean that these opportunities will be lost. We continue to emphasise that point and to argue against the UK government's approach as they try to select elements of Erasmus Plus that they believe would be most useful to participate in. Even if that was accepted by the European Union, it would mean that our young people in future education would be under an unacceptable disadvantage, in my opinion. Both in meetings with Michael Gove, for example, the Chancellor of the Duchy of Lancaster, but also in a range of letters that I've written to the UK government, that Erasmus Plus remains for Wales a real priority in the negotiations on the future relationship between the United Kingdom and the EU. And I've strongly argued that if they don't value Erasmus Plus in England, which is a matter for the UK government, then they should negotiate for the participation of Wales in the future programme so that we can make our own decisions to support our young people here in Wales and to allow our learners and the sector to continue to benefit from what we've heard so far today. And I think ensuring that the opportunities for mobility internationally are not lost is crucial for us, and it seems clear, obvious to us really, that participating in the future Erasmus Plus programme is certainly the easiest and the best way to do that. However, that isn't entirely obviously within our gift, and if the Westminster government can't secure that, any domestic replacement must replace in full both the benefits and the funding, which is provided by Erasmus Plus.
including the breadth of opportunities in vocational settings that we've heard about so far today, and crucially, it has got to be jointly developed by the 4 nations on the basis of an approach of co-production, if you like, so that we have our voice in that. We've got grave concerns about the approach, which we think is both heavy-handed and disproportionate, that the UK government is taking in its internal market bill, which you may have heard about, and which threatens to ride roughshod over devolution to override the powers that we've got in Wales, and would effectively give the UK government free rein, if you like, to develop a UK-wide domestic alternative to the scheme, to Erasmus+, which would then meet England's objectives, but not ours in Wales. Now, the Westminster government needs to demonstrate that it can work with us as Welsh ministers, rather than using the bill to circumvent the Senedd and Welsh ministers in the support that we want to give to Welsh learners and Welsh education sector and the economy at large. But coming back to Erasmus+, it's a well understood scheme, it's a well established scheme, it's got good uptake, it's got great partnership arrangements, which are the product of many, many years of working together in partnership. And we've tried to help maintain and strengthen those relationships in how we prepare for the end of transition, which is in 11 weeks' time, partly, as Iestyn was saying, by funding ColegauCymru, including to do a mobility project with Brittany, and we've got a commitment with them to collaborate in the field of education more broadly. And though COVID has impeded the project, I'd be very interested to hear your views about the pilot that we could feed into the UK government, both in terms of their negotiations with the EU on Erasmus+ specifically, obviously, but alternatively, if it becomes necessary, in the development then of a domestic alternative programme. And as I was saying, COVID-19 has also compounded the challenges that Brexit brings to the sector in Wales. When we launched our first international strategy for Wales in January of this year, we argued that internationalising, not hiding, if you like, would be key to Wales' survival and our future prosperity. But little did we know, in truth, that at that point we'd have a pandemic which would bring home that point with such impact and such force. The Minister for International Relations at the time, Lynette Morgan, when she launched the strategy, said, "It may be true to say that we are leaving the European Union, but we are not turning our backs on the EU or the world." And the strategy which she launched clearly positions Wales as an outward-looking international nation. And I think now more than ever, it's vital that we maintain all those networks and partnerships that we've frankly spent decades in growing in Europe, as well as obviously growing new links in addition to those pre-existing relationships. I think the structures which support international cooperation and the learning that you get from it will be all the more important, I think, as we try and respond to COVID. I'm hopeful that we can one day soon enjoy the social and educational benefits that travelling in person to other countries can bring to us. But in the meantime, I'm looking forward to hearing more from the next speakers today about the many benefits that Erasmus+ has brought to Wales through sport. And I hope that the testimonies that you hear today, especially from our young people, will encourage members right across the Senedd, for example, to advocate to their colleagues for full participation in the future Erasmus+ programme. Diolch, Iestyn.
Diolch, Ymyriadau. Thank you, Minister. It is really something we're grateful for, that you've taken, shall I say, you've taken the fight to the UK government around Erasmus+ and put the needs, interests and desires of Welsh young people, learners, students and employers firmly on the agenda there. We're very grateful for that. We do hope that some form of domestic third-party arrangement would avoid us having to reinvent the wheel, that we can make the best of the capacity we've already got. And ultimately, that doesn't preclude us from doing a Wales-led bilateral set of arrangements anyway. And it is a real shame to many of us that the bilateral arrangement with Brittany has been delayed because of COVID, and we look forward to revisiting that. And ultimately, I think as we look across the the post sort of Brexit agenda more widely, for those of us who believe, as ColegauCymru certainly does, that made in Wales solutions to not always made in Wales, but inherited by Wales problems in the economy and in terms of social mobility, for instance, those problems are best tackled by a made in Wales approach, and the internal market bill puts that at serious jeopardy. And we are very concerned, not just in terms of Erasmus Plus, but our programs around apprenticeships, employability, traineeships, all these key activities that FE colleges are involved in are very much in jeopardy and could end up being led by a set of priorities that don't meet the needs of Wales. So please, again, in that respect, do take forward our concerns to your UK government colleagues who are firmly acting, it seems, on the behalf of England, not on behalf of Wales, and make sure that that is taken forward as well. But looking back now, Minister, onto more happier days when mobilities were taking place, Rob, can you tell us a bit about your YSDA Youth Sports Development Ambassador projects and how Erasmus Plus has been used in those respects as well?
Thanks, Iestyn. Good afternoon, everyone. Good afternoon, Minister. We started this project well, way back now. I think it was sort of 2017, and it was sort of, for me, the actual process of that started 2 or 3 years earlier, where I accidentally printed off a 300-page program guide in the office on my second day in employment. So there's a lot of challenges with these projects, but what I'm going to show you in a minute is basically our experiences from it, what we think it meant to the students involved. And I think 2 of the messages for me that have already come out of this is, one is that those students, both from Wales and the 6 partner countries, would not have had the opportunities they had without the European funding. That's a certainty. And also we were able to, probably more importantly, share something we were doing really well in Wales at the time. So I like the comment before where some things were happening in Holland, were a little bit ahead of us, but I think in this case, we were ahead of some of the other countries and we were able to share that. So hopefully, if everything goes to plan, I'm going to share a screen now with a PowerPoint. And we'll just take everyone through that. So hopefully this works. Okay. So the YSDA project, as I mentioned, started off pretty much in Cardiff, going back about 2017. This picture shows the sort of group that's involved in all stages through the project. We involved young people from the sort of 7 partner countries, and that included Hungary, Portugal, Bulgaria, Poland, Italy, Slovenia, and I probably missed one out. I always miss one out, but basically there was a range of countries in there that weren't your typical holiday destinations, and there were certainly some challenges in that project that we feel we addressed. It was funded centrally as a collaborative sport fund. Took a couple of years to get through and actually be successful. So we had one hit at it first and didn't get there, learned from that and went back. The value of the project in monetary terms was €352,000 and shared between the countries and various different resources. And the main aspect of it was to introduce peer-led intervention based on the Young Ambassadors Cymru model, which is basically using young people in schools and colleges to lead their peers and to create activity, or not just to coach, but actually go and talk to the guys and find out what they want to do and then deliver some activity for them. And that was intended across 7 countries. When I say it was multi-agency, we had ourselves managing it through FE in Wales. We had local authorities, municipalities, national development, sports associations. We had clubs from the 7 partner countries involved. So there's a lot of different experiences in there. And I think that was really valuable in learning from different areas, particularly when we got to the end, we saw some of those experiences firsthand. You can see in this slide as well the scale of the sort of investment involved. It created 30 ambassadors across the countries. There was 21 project staff involved. And the focus for the project was young people from ethnic minority groups. And I'll touch on that very quickly. In Wales, that was based around 4 of the largest cities in Wales and the colleges in those cities. But some of the organisations we worked with dealt with situations where, I'm going to say racism, for want of a better word, was embedded. It was really, really alienating the people they were working with from using, say, just a local community facility. So some of the Roma people in Hungary couldn't use a playground, or some of the people in Italy were in positions where they were almost sort of enclosed in ghettos, for want of a better word, and they weren't allowed to use other areas because they were very new migrants in the area. So what I'll show you next is a little bit of the sort of solutions and some of the stuff we came up with. The opportunities we created, these are 3 examples. So the group in the left, right in the classroom, are from Newport. They're a group of minors seeking asylum. So those guys have all landed in the UK. They're all scattered across South East Wales. They don't all live in Newport. And they came from 12 different nationalities in terms of the country. So those guys from everywhere, from Afghanistan to Kurdistan to all the war-torn parts of the world you could think of. The group up in the top corner on the right are from a place called Yakaruda in Bulgaria. That's about the most deprived social area in the mountains of Bulgaria. They're a Muslim minority called a Pomak population, and the project basically made connections that would see those guys, some of them come into Wales. It would see some of our students going out to Bulgaria to learn about what they were doing. And an example from there, without going into a lot of detail, was they were told at the start the girls can't take part in the project by the mayor of the village. And they were also told that they couldn't travel. And the school teacher there basically said, no, it's not your decision in this case. And he overrode that. And similarly, the picture of the boxing gym, that was a situation in Hungary near Debrecen, where the Roma girls weren't allowed to use their local boxing club. And through the project, they were actually then allowed to go in and be coached by the boys for the first time, you know, in sort of their history. So there's lots of examples of where the project created new opportunities. And I think the viewers, they would never have had those opportunities for the participants. This video now, just quickly, I'd love to talk about this all day, and yesterday's probably what I'm going to go on for about half an hour, but basically this video will show you something here that happened in Swansea. The girl on the right in the picture is a young lady called TATA Steel. She's a Polish immigrant, for better word, who's been living in Swansea for maybe 4 or 5 years at this stage. She learned English as a second language in college. She's a second-year student in this video. She was the YSDA, so she was the ambassador that went to Bulgaria, was involved in training, doing the projects and representing Gower College. We had 3 others around Wales in the different projects that we ran here. And she's interviewing a young lad from Sudan who was part of one of the participants. So she had to run 10 sessions over 10 weeks for the guys and create activity that was suitable. So I'm hoping the video will work. I'm going to cut this short because it goes on a little bit, but I think it's a good example of, you know, the type of people we were working with and learners that would engage with the project.
So what's your name? My name is Faisal. And where are you from? I'm from Sudan. I want to ask you about sports activities. Which one of them did you enjoy the most? Wow, we did a lot of sport. I like most of them, actually. I like the football. Yeah. I hope that next year, if it is, we could do more of football. And I like the table tennis and squash, and we did trampoline also. It was nice. And actually, the sport idea is very nice. Make us communicate, and you know, and it's really good idea. Yeah, that's great. Which sport activity would you like to do again? Actually, I like to do more on football, and we could do like I heard that there's more other different teams like doing the same activities, so we could do like game training on other different places, which is really great, and we could.
I feel like I'm cutting him off there, but he won't know, obviously. So it's pretty much in terms of that, the reason I put that video in there, I think is quite interesting in that type of activity with the ESOL learners at Gower College now is embedded in their programme. So as a result of that European funding, there isn't any funding sort of left over. Those guys have moved on. So those students have gone on to new and hopefully better things, and they're trained, and the projects benefit them that way. But ESOL learners, both particularly in Gwent at Newport and also in Gower College, are now still benefiting by having regular sports and physical activity and well-being activities as part of their programs that were pretty much created by that young lady and the other ambassadors that we see in the pictures. And I think there's quite an important message at the end of this is that some of the funding gets very often looked at as, you know, you get the funding, you do the project, and then nothing happens afterwards. But I think with some of the Erasmus Plus stuff that we've been involved with, there is a legacy. It's not always a financial one. Sometimes it's cultural, or a change at the organisation, or it's a different perception. And certainly a couple of points for me from this one are, we found a way that we were working with young people from BAME communities and backgrounds within college environments. In a lot of cases in this project, they were refugees, asylum seekers and people engaged with ESOL courses. But I think sometimes we try and approach these groups in a divided way as well. So we tend to try and work with separate community groups or identify people in the community, when actually in these colleges, the most mixed and diverse groups were these ESOL learners, and they've been able to work together. And I think finally on this, the last bit of legacy in this is that set of volleyball posts on the beach in Swansea came from the London 2012 Olympics. And that was something that somebody had a bit of funding through, I guess it was through the council, they bought those, they put them on the beach, and they were virtually never used. But the Polish lady from the college, the young lady who was the ambassador, had seen this, and she asked her group, do you want to use them? And the planning was brilliant. She lined it up. She's obviously planned the weather. The day there was a fantastic day on the beach in Swansea, but it was in February. So if you look closely at the picture, some of those guys are wearing parkas, some have got ski jackets on. They've probably been in the UK for 6 months and come from somewhere, as that young guy had, like from Sudan. So we had a few issues, you know, there were a few small things, it wasn't perfect, but I think the end result with the Erasmus, you know, we learned a lot, I certainly did. The funding produced a lot of activity and new experiences, and sort of, I think these guys, if you see from the video, they were able to adapt and enjoy, you know, the benefits of Erasmus Plus. So hopefully I haven't gone on too long with that, but that's just a few of my thoughts and experiences from there.
Okay, diolch yn fawr, Rob. I know, Minister, and all the delegates who are listening will be aware of how dynamic that project was. You know, a student ambassador originally from Poland in an institution in Wales, engaging in places like Bulgaria and Hungary with members from the Sudanese community. It doesn't get any richer and more diverse than that, I don't think, in terms of what we're achieving. And dare I say, we can understand why certain individuals from political tendencies who don't like that level of integration, particularly don't like Erasmus Plus, I would like to see us stop participating, Minister, in programs such as that. It's probably all their worst nightmares come at once when they see such integration and cooperation happening together for everybody's mutual benefit and well-being. So I certainly hope that, Rob, those kind of projects continue. And we find ourselves again, Rob, you know, leading one of those projects and demonstrating what a small bilingual, culturally diverse nation like Wales can do, not just when it comes to the usual things around culture, but around sport as well. So another great example of the Erasmus Plus legacy for us as an institution, and hopefully for individuals more widely. Now, we've mentioned once or twice already the impact that Erasmus Plus has had on us as people who work in the FE sector, whether that's in the vocational setting, the academic setting, adult learning. FE is a diverse sector. There's no college in Wales, I think, more diverse than Cardiff and Vale College in a number of ways. And from the college now, Emil Evans is going to talk about his personal experience in participating as a member of staff in Erasmus Staff Exchange. Diolch i ti, Emil.
Diolch, Iestyn, and thank you, pnawn da pawb, and thank you to all the other contributors. Really interesting just listening to what everyone's got to say, and with every minute, what I was going to say has been a little bit taken away from me, because, but you know, it's great to be part of this. If I take you back about 3 years ago, I've been lucky enough to be on 3 Erasmus Plus visits over the last 3 years. But if I took you back to the beginning of 2018, I think it was an actual conversation I had with Sian, Holler and Iestyn. What did internationalization mean to me? And if you asked me that 3 years ago, and I said, well, yeah, internationalization, that's our commercial arm. That's where we get all our money, our extra funding from. So we get Chinese students over to do foundation degrees or A levels, and we earn a bit of money from it, But over the course of the 3 visits I took to Denmark, to Finland, and then last year to Italy, a completely different view of what internationalization is and what it should be. And I just want to give you a couple of concrete examples of what it now means to me at the back end of 2020. And excuse me, some examples of the legacy of those visits in terms of what our students and our staff have gained from it. So I'll take you back to that first visit. It was to Sonderborg, a medium-sized town in Denmark. It's about 70, 80 miles west of Copenhagen. And we went on that trip went on that visit to look, ostensibly was to look at partnership that the college had with employers in the region. And I particularly remember two incidents from that, two things really. I spent a morning with the IT department in that college, small IT department compared with mine in Cardiff and Vale. But it was an extraordinary thing they were doing there. They had, unlike us and most other colleges in Wales, I would presume, outsourced their IT support function, so the maintenance and replacement of IT across campuses. Their students did all that work. And I was fascinated sitting there listening to the head of IT and talking to the students about what they did. So essentially, the maintenance of and repair of all those computers was done by the students in pods, led by HND students, so level 4 students, but involving the level 3 and level 2 IT students as well, and pretty much supervised by the head of department and that deputy head. It was a fascinating idea. And obviously, from my perspective as a vice principal, I was thinking, my God, that must save a hell of a lot of money as well. So going back to Cardiff, then I spoke to our IT department, spoke to Circle IT, who we outsourced it to, and started to think about, well, how could we do that? And there's no way we could have, emulated what was going on in Sonderburg College, but what did happen as a result of that was that I had a phone call from Sean a couple of weeks later saying, we've had a contact from Sonderburg College, one of the HND students who would like to come over and do some work experience with you. It's a bit of a long story, but I then remember an IT student approaching me in the canteen that lunchtime in Sonderburg and saying, could I do some work experience with you? This was just totally out of the blue. It was the same person. So we had him over to Cardiff Vale College. He was over for about 3 months last year. He did his work experience with us. The impact of that is that we now have our HND students working with Circle IT. We have level 3 students working with Circle IT, and we have IT ambassadors, or champions, actually, the name is IT champions in every department, who help out with the maintenance and function of the computers across the college, across all sites in the college. So that was an example of something that I hadn't anticipated having a huge positive impact on the students and the staff of our college. The other example from Sonderburg again, a presentation during that trip was on something called Project Zero, which was a Franco-Danish initiative looking at Project Zero being zero CO2 emissions by, I think, 2030. That was the plan, and that was the plan for Denmark. And Sonderburg College really got into bed with this idea, and it was basically focusing on retrofitting of old buildings and the enhancement of new buildings in terms of engineering construction to reduce CO2 emissions from them. Again, thanks to Sean at ColegauCymru, interesting session. It only lasted about an hour. Got back and it ended up with our head of building services and head of construction, and I do believe 1 or 2 lecturers going over there the following autumn and spending a few days there learning about this, learning about the technologies, then bringing it back and embedding that into the curriculum. So our building services team and our construction team now have taken the learnings from that Project Zero, and that is part and parcel, is embedded into the curriculum, and they're teaching and they work on that project with the learners, particularly at level 3 and level 4, but also with their apprentices as well. So just a couple of examples there from one college. I mentioned I went to Helsinki 2 years ago, I think it was now. And again, incredible stuff going on there. The number of students in that college who something like 40% of students went on an international placement every year. And I thought, wouldn't be that fantastic if we could do that in Welsh colleges? So going back again, talking to our staff, our students, and we unfortunately the COVID pandemic has sort of limited this now, but we're looking particularly at creative industries, and in particular fashion, textiles, and a project between ourselves, Carnarvon College, and ColegauCymru in Carmarthenshire, developing the production of jeans, costumes, clothing for the commercial market, which is what happened in Finland. So that department in Finland, their students made clothing, which was then sold in local shops in Helsinki, which was fantastic. And I mean, I think we've probably all got examples in colleges of going so far, but not that far in terms of producing a commercially viable product for sale in a major European city. So that was fantastic. I mean, I've got numerous examples of our students subsequently going to Barcelona for hair, beauty and spa therapies. We've had a long-standing relationship with Norway, Hordaland, where we have an exchange program with our A-level students. We still got the connection with Sonderborg I mentioned. I mean, so in 3 years as a vice principal, my interpretation of internationalization has completely transformed, and that has absolutely paid dividends for our college, and I think for the whole sector in Wales. It wasn't just me on these trips, it was colleagues from across colleges, from the FE sector across Wales. So I've been delighted and honoured to go back. I've made presentations to our governing body, to our executive team, to our strategic planning group, and it really has made a major impact on the experiences of our staff and of our students in the college. And I'm sure I can speak, Iestyn, for all the colleges who took part in those Erasmus Plus trips over the last couple of years. So thank you for listening. Happy to take any questions.
Great, diolch yn fawr, Emil. Mae yna cwestiwn gyda ni yn barod.
Thank you, Emil. We already have some questions, but from what we've seen, particularly from Emil, is the contribution that it's made to you as an individual.
The real impact that adopting EU practices can have on things like work-related experience. For those of you who are working in FE, and the Minister will be aware, a real challenge at the moment, post-COVID, Minister, is getting meaningful work-related experience outside the college, and it can often be an inhibitor to completing courses, particularly in areas of health and social care, but also in construction and other manufacturing areas. So a real object lesson on how we could adapt our activity in Wales. And good to know as well that the partnerships that Erasmus Plus brings about are not just international, they can also be domestic. And whoever heard of Cardiff and Vale College partnering with ColegauCymru, that's probably a victory worth every penny of Erasmus Plus in its own right. So some really good positives there. But two questions, Minister, before I know you have to dash, that we could perhaps end with. One is to Shane and Bryony. How important is the international dimension, Shane and Bryony, if one of you could answer the question to your experience? Clearly going to be very important for you because of your relationship with your partner sister firm in Holland. But could you have had the same experience just traveling in the UK?
No, definitely not. I think the main advantage of the session and of the 2 weeks was that we were able to be in a different environment and with different cultures and experience something different that we wouldn't have had in the country. I'm not saying if funding was available to do other things more locally, obviously with everything going on, that might be the only option going forward, but I don't think that would replicate the experience that we did have, and it wouldn't be as advantageous to going abroad.
Jane, you make the long trip from Risca to Port Talbot every day. Isn't that far enough? Isn't that international exchange its own right?
Yeah, it could be said to be that. But no, like Bryony said, it's that whole it's the whole going to somewhere where you wouldn't normally have the opportunity to go that I think really gives you that learning experience. So. And
just very, very briefly then, Minister, to wrap up perhaps with David Tristan's question. As staff, we've participated in work in Catalonia and a number of trips to the Basque Country. Incidentally, the Basque Country is an inspiration in many, many ways, not least in how it mixes social enterprise, commercial enterprise, and civic sort of responsiveness together. But obviously the question is around the language there. what main lesson could we learn from the Basque Country in Catalonia? Be proud, be up for it, be bilingual, and make it part of your everyday experience. Internationalization and diversity is here right on our doorstep. I'm sure you'd agree, David, Tristan. And the sooner we embrace our own diversity, our own dynamism as a culture here in Wales around language, use that as a springboard then to adopt other cultures and levels of diversity in our own communities. The more we embrace that and empower ourselves with that, I think the better and stronger we will be as a culture here in Wales. That was a lesson to me. My first Erasmus experience happened in my 40s. I won't say how old I was in my 40s at the time, just obviously Dad turned 40. And that really transformed my life and my thinking about language and culture and identity. And I know the staff from ColegauCymru who've been to the Basque Country in Catalonia would probably say the same. So we've now run out of time by 2 minutes. My apologies. So many good things to say, so many questions probably remain unanswered. And I would just really encourage you, please, to, if you have your experiences, to email them to us or your concerns. We can pass them on to the Counsel General. I know, Jeremy, you'll take them forward, and we know we have your support. So please take the time to do that. Please take the time to share your views with us about future projects. We have some on the stocks good to go. They've been a little bit delayed because of COVID. And just remember 2 things really. Number 1, this recording is available online, will be at some point in time. Please use it, please tweet it, please pass it on, and please give us feedback on how we can improve these online Zoom virtual deliveries from ColegauCymru, and please really support us. And the second thing, if you're wondering why Emil Evans made so many trips abroad, it's not because he just wants to go abroad, it's because actually somebody dropped out last minute on a few of them, and he happily stepped in. So, we've all gained, Emil in particular, the people who are on screen today as well. And I'm sure if you've participated already in Erasmus Plus, you know how important it is. So please tell somebody today how important Erasmus Plus is to you. Pass on the message on this Erasmus Plus Day and make sure the message gets out there. A diolch yn fawr chi gyd am gyfrannu yn y webinar yma o'r ddechrau.
Thank you very much for your contributions to this webinar.